this is the finale of our WSOP Main Event series. Espen and I wrap things up by breaking down the championship winning hands, bringing you optimal strategies and closing insights from GTO Wizard. All right, four-handed play now. Espen, you're opening the button with the chip lead, but only by a small margin. Duick defending the big blinds, just shy of 40 big blinds deep. Looks straightforward to me thus far.
Yeah, no one really under that much risk premium here. No one is super short. I'm chip leading, but it's kind of close for everyone, you know?
Duick leads on the flop, which, I'm not too surprised to see it on this board from the big blind, but do you think the final table allows for this kind of play, or is this getting out of line when you're covered by the button?
I think it might be. I'm not sure because there's not that much risk premium here, but I think if the stacks were reversed, if he obviously had more chips, there would be a lot of leading on this board. But as the stacks are right now, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised, but personally, I would not lead covered here. I would just play check range in the big blind, I think.
This is a big bet on the turn. I mean, the queen comes after he led small on the flop and you called. And now basically making the claim he has 2-pair plus, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think if you have ace-7, you really want to put in a big bet on the turn here. Probably not, right, with risk premium. I like that he gives up on the river. I think he has the nut hand to bluff river. Two worst cards you can have, basically. It would be even better to bluff hand 8-5, where you at least block some straights. 8-9 is just nut low hand to bluff river. So I like that he at least gives up on the river.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It would have been, I mean, your hand is a pretty strong candidate to call down. I don't know what we end up doing on river, but I think really kind of a no-brainer call on flop and turn from your position.
I think river as well. He just has so little zigzags, and I think we just have a really, really clean bluff catcher on the river, kind of no matter how much chips he puts in.
Yeah, for sure. So somewhat surprising to me, when we plug in the sizes that were used, there's a reasonable amount of leading, even under risk premium. Espen, you kind of pointed out, it's getting lower. It's still 9% for the big blinds, but we're not in a massive risk premium spot anymore with 4 left. And definitely on this board, just plenty of leading happening from the low cards, the open-enders, the gut shots.
Yeah, it was very unsure as well if there was going to be leading here, and we can see there is some, not a lot, but 12%. It's not nothing.
And definitely, I mean, maybe more surprising to me is that as we go through later streets, it's basically just played by the book. There's some queens in the range that arrives here. I wouldn't have pegged this as an important part of the value range, and even, A7, King 7, these hands are good enough to bet 2/3 pot. But look at 9-8, just high frequency barreling on this card. I guess it's a pretty big blank for your range. We might clear out some just random queen high floats with this half pot lead on the flop. Any reason you see to deviate from this on the turn?
Can we have a quick look at the ranges tab to see who has the most top pairs on this turn? Because I was thinking the queen is not really, let's see, top pairs. Yeah, it's actually very equal, very equal amounts of top pair. We have a bit more of the stronger ones, like king queen and ace queen. But yeah, very equal actually. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
Um,
and as played, the river was a give up as you suggested. Getting over to the strategy tab here. Yeah, just pretty bad removal. On the river with these cards, you can see the blocker score very, very poor. Lots of removal on your folds on the river. So we just don't want to follow through with this. If we do follow through on the end, it looks like we want more 5x, 4x, something that shares cards with our straights, right? Maybe something that doesn't interfere as much with your floats that are going to fold the river.
Yeah, exactly. I think we just have the nut low blockers to bluff here, blocking so many of my auto folds. Let's try to bet and see how my folding range looks, just to visualize it a bit better. Um, yeah, I mean, you can just see it's very concentrated around that area, right? We have a bit of everything, like we have hands all over the place, but um, 8-9 off is a hand that we just get to the river like this with quite a lot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a big
Hmm.
difference when you have no option on the river other than to just fold this hand. So that's obviously going to make a huge impact on how we play as the big blind.
Yeah, and we can see that my hand specifically doesn't really get to the river much like this because it's just raising the flop a lot. It's kind of
Mm.
just like a clean flop raise, but it does call the river pure, as I suggested. It's just like a very clean river bluff catcher. Um,
Yeah, not often you
yeah,
see a bluff
make
catcher
makes
on
a
the
lot.
river actually winning with the river call, but because of our blockers are so good with this particular hand that, yeah, you're actually winning by calling the river.
Yeah, but it's a cool idea that we just play pure race with this one as well on the flop, I think. It's like a very nice one if he's leading a bunch of like random 2 overcard hands like queen 8 or queen 9 or whatever. Just having unblockers to those, just yeah, avoiding getting sucked out on. And it's a hand as well where if we are behind, we always have equity. So I don't know. It seems like yeah, it makes a lot of sense, I think, to raise this one.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a cool idea. So fairly sizable lead for you now. You're opening in the cutoff with 70 plus big blinds in your stack, and you've got kings. You're just not supposed to have a hand this good when you're chip leading and you're opening the cutoff. I'm not sure that it's allowed.
It does seem a bit unfair, for sure. I'm gonna be opening really wide here with this stack distribution for sure. I don't blame him for putting all these chips in the middle here. I don't blame him. I'm not sure if it's actually gonna happen. It's kind of one of those where, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the preflop sim for this.
Hmm.
It depends how outrageous I'm gonna be with opening here, which I assume is gonna be quite outrageous. Maybe it's
Sure.
fine. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it would have been like I would have played this hand the same way as Eames. I also haven't seen a solution for it yet, but it just feels intuitive to take an offsuit ace, especially a good offsuit ace like this, and just deny your whole range. You're going to put Eames in pretty tough post flop spots if he just flats, and even if he three bets small, like you're just going to flat a lot and put him in tough spots. So this does seem like the cleanest play, but obviously you can't extend that logic to everything, right? You've got to flat somewhere. You can't just jam every hand that you don't want to play post.
Oh, no, I think you're probably right. I think you're probably right.
Well,
GG Eames.
let's have a look. So here's the solution for your first in spot. Is this as wide as you were expecting? I mean, we're 40% in the cutoff.
I think I would have gone maybe a bit wider even. I would probably have included all the pairs probably. I would have included some hands like queen 3 suited, 9-6 suited, 7-5 suited.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would go something like this, but maybe slightly wider.
Yeah. And, you know, perhaps the only limitation really, other than the short stacks going all in, is how wide is Attenborough going to flat us in position? This is what Attenborough would have played on the button, according to this sim. I'm actually surprised he's only playing this many hands, given how tight, let's say, we're opening the cutoff, right? I would have thought, oh, if we're showing restraint, it's because maybe Attenborough gets to flat somewhat wide on the button, but that doesn't really seem to be the case.
No. Yeah, he's mixing folds with 10-9 suited, which I don't think would have happened in game.
So let's look at Eames's response in the big blind. We know that he had ace jack offsuit here, and we can see in the solution, it's a fair bit better to jam than taking the other options. Is there any part of this strategy that feels, I mean, like there's some jams in here. While the ace jack feels intuitive, there's some jams in here that are not intuitive to me. and probably wouldn't be intuitive to most players. But does this strategy make you feel, better or worse about opening loose in the cutoff?
I mean, most of these hands are intuitive, as you said. You have like the triangle kind of in the middle of like mid pairs and some of the suited connectors slash suited Broadway stuff. Then you have like the ace jack off, ace queen off, ace king off, all very intuitive. Some of the small pairs, some of the small suited aces, very intuitive. The ones that tend to show up quite often actually in ICM sims that is not so human to do. I think it's gonna be like the king 10 off, the jack 10 off,
Hmm.
uh, the offsuit varieties here that have kind of the same effects as it's kind of the same reason as you jam the suited connectors like jack 10 suited, right? You just fold out a lot of hands that dominate you. And yeah, they just have a little bit less equity when called. But they have the same effect basically, right? Yeah, we
Yeah.
can see that my king says calling. I did well. Good job, me.
Was just showing the calling range to see that, hands as weak as Jack 10 will still have reasonable equity when called. You're calling pocket sevens, you're calling ace queen offsuit, right? Like you're calling hands that you're live against when you bluff those hands.
I'm not calling as wide as this though, for sure. Uh, there's a few of these hands where I would just be out for sure. I would kind of struggle with ace jack off here. I think ace 10 off, I'm for sure out. King jack suited, I'm for sure out. King 10 suited, for sure out. Pocket
Yeah.
sixes, I'm probably out. For me here, I would probably call something like sevens, uh, ace queen for sure. Ace jack off, I'm like hating life. Ace 10 suited, I'm hating. Kind of. Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Makes sense. Given what you're expecting people not to jam from this strategy here, I think it makes sense to fold those hands.
I think most people, especially if they haven't studied too much solver stuff and ICM, particularly like reshoving like the suited, like queen 8 suited, jack 9 suited, 10-9 suited, ace 7 offsuit. Yeah,
Not gonna happen.
it becomes dicey. It becomes very dicey to call some of these marginal calls if people aren't finding these so-called bluff jams.
Yeah. 3 left now. You're on the button with almost 100 big blinds. Are we doing anything super creative here, or are we just min raising a whole lot?
I don't think there's going to be any jamming if that's what you're asking. I think Attenborough is a bit too deep. I don't think, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a solver solution, and I don't think it's going to be in my best interest either. I think I'm just going to be very happy to play a lot of raising here and kind of, um, yeah, just try to grind it down basically.
Wow, this is sick from Dueck. Cold 4-bet
Good.
all in with ace jack off. Catches Attenborough 3-betting the ace 7 suited. Do you have any quick thoughts on either of their plays?
I'm gonna guess that both are good. This all seems standard to me. My open is standard for sure. The 3-bet seems fine, kind of whatever. The jam seems good. I think it's just a good hand of poker.
All right, so here's the solution for your button opening range. So far, is this lining up with your expectations?
Yeah, pretty much, I would say. Just very wide and yeah, I would probably go a bit wider here as well. If I'm a bit out of line in these spots, I would include like king 5 off, maybe even king 4 off. I would probably induce, I would probably raise like jack deuce suited, 10-3 suited. Yeah, all of these are like borderline hands. I would maybe go like 1 pip wider, but I would go something like this. It looks very reasonable to me.
Yeah, looks like the EVs are close anyways. We'll take a look at what Attenborough's meant to do in the small blind. I can already see that his 3-bet sizing is larger than the one used in game. I think he went to 8 big blinds in game. But even still, he's finding a lot of these suited aces as bluffs. Ace 7 suited, a totally reasonable one.
Yep, makes sense.
So against this range, I mean, just kind of anticipating the ace jack offsuit play, there's a number of 3-bets in here that we're doing well against. Obviously, it's dicey that there's all the jacks plus and all the ace queen, but not ace queen suited. Let's see what Duig
He
wants to.
also almost has full frequency of king jack off and ace 10 off half the time. So we're dominating those as well.
Well, in spite of this, and maybe because to some extent the sizing is large here, ace jack is folding and looks like a pretty sizable mistake to put it in this solution. But I mean, how much of this, if we go down that tree, how much of this is tied to the small blind sort of being priced in with everything? We saw in game, we got ace-7 suited to fold rapidly.
Yeah, the only fold we're getting here is ace 10 off, and that's very bad for ace jack off. So
Indeed.
it makes sense that in this solution, we're losing a lot putting it in. Yeah. I think in game it's gonna work out a lot better for us, and he used the smaller sizing as well, so we're gonna get more folds and yeah, potentially be up against a bit of a wider range as well. Like small blind was mixing folds with ace 10 off versus the open, I think,
Yeah, that's right.
which I think is completely unrealistic in game. King 8 suited is pure folding. I think that's completely unrealistic. Um, so there's a few hands in here which I think is like for sure just gonna get 3-bet by Attenborough.
Still three-handed, now Attenborough opening ace-jack of clubs on the button into your big blind. And Duick is pausing with a hand that feels like it probably shouldn't be pausing.
This is an outrageous hand of poker. I remember this one. First of all, just finding the 3-bet here is so out of line. Attenborough's second chip lead opening into the chip leader. He's opening quite a tight range already. Trying to find loose 3-bets. Like even King 8 suited would just be a fold here. Yeah, I don't like this 3-bet. But Mickey was yeah, he was willing to play some pots, that's for sure.
Yeah,
So was Attenborough though. So was Attenborough, so it's not really a guy to attack either.
we were complimenting Duick earlier in a couple spots throughout these videos where, his aggression paid off because opponents were not willing to fight back, or like, opponents were shying away from playing aggressively. Feels like Adrian not the person to target to try to get that outcome.
No, for sure. He was very much willing to battle, and this is a very bad card for Duick.
Yikes. I think check
Very
check,
bad card for Duick.
like it sort of is a foregone conclusion. I think that King 8's going to lose a lot of money once we go post flop, but checking the Queen 10-5 looks unnecessary to me. If anyone's going to miss that flop, it's Attenborough's range. Small blind should be all over this flop. Just generally have a lot of equity. I would think we can bluff quite nicely on the flop and expect some folds from like low pairs or suited ace-x, hands like that.
Yep. Attenborough's low plays the nuts here. I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. Your opponent is going to be drawing dead quite often.
And I mean, obviously we've kind of stepped in it by 3-betting such a weak hand in the first place, but even this turn value bet feels kind of thin to me.
Yeah, no, I would for sure check the turn. Usually if it's a spot where you're going to be mixing mixing checks with your range like this, using the weakest top pairs in the checking range, I think is like a reasonable approach. Just to make sure that if the river is a king, you can have trips sometimes, even if you check the turn, stuff like that. Um, yeah, he goes for the value bet on the river as well, which I think is also outrageous. I don't think that's Yeah, I don't think it's close to a value bet on the river. And then he gets snap jammed on, and now he's not happy. He ends up calling it
Yeah.
off, but I think he knows. I think he knows.
Yeah, respectfully pays the last chip after leaving it behind. Sort of a show of sportsmanship to snap jam the ace jack suited there on the end. But now Attenborough heads up with you, even stacked.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the heads up had quite a few interesting hands. We didn't even play that many hands, but we played for a long time, as we're gonna see when we get to those hands, because there was some infamous tanking hands in that heads up.
All right, Espen, we're down to heads up. We're extremely deep. You're on the button with king, queen of clubs. I remember this hand well because I believe I watched some of it live and nothing happened for the entire time that I watched because there's some tanking coming in this hand. But let's start with the strategy of the spot. We open 2.5x on the button. We're playing big blind ante heads up, so larger raise makes sense. Attenborough 3-betting the jack 4 of diamonds. You call. Any thoughts on preflop so far?
Haven't looked at the sim. I'm not sure if his hand is going to be 3-betting, but it seems like a reasonable one to me. Like, we're quite deep, so you probably just don't want to use like a bunch of offsuit stuff. Using some suited stuff could make sense. The jack 4 suited, I don't know, like some small frequency, maybe I could see it. Definitely not going to be one of those slam dunk 3-bets. But yeah, I could see it. I think my hand is completely standard, of course. I don't think 4-betting this one makes too much sense. I think we're a bit too deep to just 4-bet get it in, and definitely not 4-betting to fold either. So just calling seems good.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Both preflop plays seem fine. I wouldn't necessarily bet the flop as Attenborough, but I understand the idea. We got a double Broadway board. We 3-bet before the flop. It's reasonable to want to be aggressive. You call, and now he's coming with a large second barrel after turning bottom pair. I could see this folding out some stronger hands, of course, than a 4. But do we like this play? And furthermore, from your side, I mean, what are your options here?
Looking at this hand now, I remember thinking in game that it felt like he was bluffing, and I wanted him to keep bluffing. Looking at it now, it seems like kind of a slam dunk all in hand for me. We don't have a heart, we don't have a spade, we have the best king that we can have. Yeah, I would like to just be all in on the turn if I could replay this hand, I think. And his barrel seems kind of cool to me, honestly. It could be one of those Mega Masters. Like, he's folding out 5s, 6s, 7s. He's folding out some 10x, some 8x. He's getting called by nut flush draws, both hearts and spades. He's getting called by like queen 9 of spades, queen 9 of hearts. You know, like, he's getting called by a lot of worse hands, and he's folding out a lot of better hands, which is
Yeah.
kind of a cool idea, I think.
Yeah, I have to think that's what he was going for. If the turn was, in hindsight, actually a play that he thought was a good play. But I mean, the tricky part is that even if we are ahead of some of those missed draws, we still need to both fade them, and we also need to check them and somehow win at showdown, right? And that's the spot that Attenborough ends up tanking for, I believe it was 23 minutes with. I don't think we're going to put the viewers through 23 minutes of tank here. We'll see how much the highlight video here cut it
I
down,
don't.
but
Yeah, I assume the highlight video also didn't want to put the viewers through that, so I'm gonna assume it's already edited down quite a bit. I think this was maybe the first hand of heads up as well, if I remember correctly. This is just like maybe not the first, but it was very early in the heads up. Um, and yeah, uh,
for your
do
spot in position, I mean, just straightforward value jam. I mean, you're not expecting a better hand to really check on the 8. It's kind of a blank.
yeah, it kind of feels like a spot where you're not getting called all that often, but we just still have such a slam dunk value jam, I think. Um, So yeah, kind of straightforward for me on the river. I think I could see reasons for raising the flop. I could see reasons for jamming the turn. I'm kind of looking forward to looking at the sim for this one because I think it's like a very interesting hand, both from his perspective and mine. I'm looking forward to looking at the sim. Should we just cut it there? Like, spoiler, he folds. We move on. I'm big chick lead now.
I was
Yeah,
just
I don't
gonna
think we're gonna wait.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I was so impressed at how well you could stay still in game for 23 minutes, but it seems like now the tank is too much for you. Any tips for the viewers on how to stay still for 23 minutes? Is it just have top pair? Is that the best
Uh,
way?
just have it. just have it. I would like to think that I would be able to stay still if I was bluffing as well, but it's obviously easier when you just have it. It's kind of fun to watch him, watch him now, like, be in this super painful situation. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
kind of fun to watch back.
We'll cut it back here. Attenborough does fold in the end. Let's take a quick look at the sim. All right, looking at the solution here, you've got the option to limp or to raise in this heads up solution. Raising king queen suited is definitely the standard play, but on Attenborough's side, jack 4 suited isn't in the 3-bet range here. It's certainly looking like a fine play. The EVs are about the same, but in general, doesn't seem like we want to be 3-betting a whole lot of these hands. I mean, we'll put this into the solution so that we can see how it navigates, because obviously jack 4 offsuit isn't going to be in there either. But is there anything about this 3-bet strategy that you think is totally off or unexpected compared to what Adrian might be doing?
I mean, compared to what he was doing, I'm not sure because obviously I found a hand that's never tributing, but it's the same EV. I think like mixing in some random hands like this, we can see like queen 6 suited, for example, finds his way in there, and king 3 suited. These are stronger hands, of course, but yeah, I mean, we can on the offsuit side, we see king 4, queen 5, 10 6. You know, like, I don't know. I think it's kind of whatever. I think we should just node lock a little bit of a jack 4 in there and maybe some, yeah, it's hard to know exactly what strategy he was playing, of course, but add a little bit of jack 4 at least so we can see how that one proceeds and then just go to post flop.
Sounds good. All right, so we force the jack 4 suited into the pre-flop range. We set the bet size to be the same as Adrian's. I mean, we're off to a fine start according to the solution. He just gets to bet pretty often on this kind of board if he's going to be using a small size. And you continue mostly by calling, so all looks fine so far. When we get to the turn,
Worth worth
big,
mentioning that he was meant to bet big and polar on the flop. I guess we had to change the sizing to the one he used.
yeah, yeah, that's correct. Mostly wanted to bet big, um, and do some checking, but with the small size forced, we end up betting at a high frequency. Turn, now we polarize, and jack 4 suited, it's not the craziest play to include this in the barreling range. You can see it's not standard to double barrel without the flush draw, but other fours also, it's not crazy. 5-4 suited, 6-4 suited, jack 4 suited. These hands are basically indifferent between a large bet and a check. And it's, I think, because of what you sort of suggested, we're getting flush draws to continue, we're getting straight draws to continue, but we're folding out 5s, 6s, 7s, 9s, and even some 10x.
Yeah, even some queen X. Oh, wait, what am I saying? Queen X. Yeah, 10x. Never mind. Go on.
I shall. So we get to the 8 of clubs river, and now we have a clear check, regardless of the suits. You can see the EVs of the jack 4, even the ones that don't have hearts. And once we do check, it looks like you have a clear jam, and he's legitimately in a tough spot. I mean, this is very, very close to zero. The 5-4s, the 6-4s. I mean, some of these hands are legitimately thinking about check calling. Even some ace high hands are very seriously thinking about check calling the river. Um, I mean, is it just as simple as there's a bunch of missed draws? We're ahead of all those missed draws, and some of them are going to have to bluff. So sometimes we can bluff catch with a hand this week.
There is a lot of them, yeah. I remember thinking when I saw this hand that jack 4 must be like a very bad one. Like the jack just seems like such a bad card. You're blocking queen jack, you're blocking jack 9. I don't know. Like, can I have a look at.
Here, just showing your bluffing range. Although if you wanted to, it, you know,
Right. So queen jack, not really bluffing that much. Jack 9 is bluffing a lot, but it's just a few suited combos. Okay.
yeah, it
Yeah,
looks like
jack 5 as well.
when you arrive to river, there's a number of missed flush draws, and even 7-6 suited was double gutter on the turn. So 7-6 suited of all suits arrives here. 9-7 suited of all suits arrives here. There's quite a few bluff candidates that are worse than queen jack.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Can I have a look at the turn strategy for me? Am I meant to go all in with king queen suited at a decent frequency, or how does that look?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
do seem
Yeah.
does seem like you even pointed out without spades or hearts, kind of nice to be able to go all in and clear some equity. And it does look like those are the best ones. King, queen, diamonds, and clubs, and even the offsuit king, queens, and king jacks that avoid some of those flush cards are going all in.
Yeah. Makes sense that we're slow playing the king queen of hearts, of course, is just too good. But okay, it doesn't seem like the EVs. I mean, it's different. I still would like to see myself jam king queen of clubs, I think. If I would replay this hand today, I think it just works better as well strategically. I think it just yeah, versus actual ranges and actual strategies, I think probably just jamming the king queen of clubs is going to be the better play, to be honest. But yeah.
23 minutes later, and you get another button open opportunity. So now we're 35 big blinds effective. Attenborough's covered. You're opening the Jack 7 offsuit to 2.5x. He defends King 3 of clubs. Anything you expect to go differently with either of these two hands?
I think I was playing a strategy where I was mixing limps and races, and I was just randomizing for each decision basically when I thought it was a mix. I guess I rolled high to raise this one. I would think this one mixes quite a bit.
Yeah, this is that kind of in between hand strength where I could see, limping it kind of being indifferent if we get raised. But if we raise it, uh, we can clear out some stuff. And if we get 3-bet, we just have an easy fold. So I kind of like the raise. Go for
Yep.
large bet on the 9-6-4. Not surprised to see the size on this board, but is there anything about betting this hand on the flop that you like in particular?
I went for the B66. I would assume that I randomized this one as well. I would like it a lot more if I had a club, probably, but it is one of those where I have a lot of interaction with the board. I have an overcard. I have a 7 that can bluff a lot of 5x, 3x, 8x, 10x. There's a lot of good turns for me that I can bluff here. Um, I deem the king worthy as well, apparently. We can see that I am in very, very rough shape here with 0% equity versus top pair and a flush draw. Um, yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about the turn barrel. The flop barrel, I'm very happy with. I think that's completely fine. I would assume it's just going to be a mix, a lot of mixing in heads up. Um, yeah, what do you think?
Well, one thing I'm noticing is if the stacks are right, the bet size on the turn was pretty large, maybe unnecessarily large for remaining stacks. We've now got 70 million behind, so like half pot behind, and the turn bet was almost 3/4. So that's not ideal, I suppose. Um, it's always tricky to figure out the perfect air combos to bluff on the turn. I'm not sure where Jack of Diamonds, 7 of Spades is going to fall exactly, but my instinct is that I would probably check behind the turn more often than not and look to bluff cards I either interact with better or like the total bricks. River is not going to go well as played. You jam, which is hard to fault you for, and obviously 2 pair is going to snap it off.
Yeah, I like having a 7, of course. I like not having a club. I don't think the jack is doing me many favors. I block king jack, I guess, which is fine, but um, yeah, that's grasping at straws, I think. Curious to look how this one actually looks in the solver. Let's have a look.
So looking post flop at your spot, we filled in the same flop size that you wanted to use. Solver originally generated 40% pot, but I don't think this strategy is going to be all that different in terms of EV. It's just a lot of mixing, right? There's certainly nothing wrong with bluffing this hand on the flop. Seems like it's pretty indifferent with checking, but mostly we're betting. Attenborough's hand is mixing in some raises on the flop, but calling is certainly fine. And just kind of paying attention to how many kings are getting to the turn because it will determine to some extent like how aggressive we want to be. It's pretty much just the double overcard kings with backdoor flush draws, not just naked king high calling against this larger bet. So when we do get to the king of spades turn, I suppose this is when it gets interesting. This is surprisingly more aggressive than I was anticipating even. How does this line up with your expectation of how to play the king, Espen?
There's two things that comes to mind here. First of all, like I'm betting big on the flop, so his range is continuing to the turn is going to be overall stronger than if we use, say, B40. At the same time, when I use this bigger sizing, we're going to clear out a lot of king X. Like if I go B40 here, I would assume that he just pure continuous king queen offsuit. Doesn't matter if he has a club or not. But versus this B67, we could see that he's folding all the king queen, all the king jack, all of these hands as long as he doesn't have a club, right? So I guess the bigger size is to my advantage on the king turn, actually, which is probably why we end up with a surprisingly high betting frequency for me as well.
Yeah, and you pointed out that, maybe you'd rather have a club, and you can kind of see from the Jack 7 combos that the clubs are betting more often than the non-clubs, but that doesn't mean that this is a bad bluff. It certainly looks like a totally fine combo choice, because we are just betting pretty often with everything. But sizing-wise, the auto-generated size was exactly geometric, it looks like here. So 69, 70% pot. Although I don't think this is going to make a notable difference in which combos we choose for your bluffing strategy.
Yeah, I think I went like 75% in game, so slightly bigger, but doesn't matter. We can see my combo is like whatever, is half the time betting, half the time checking, the jack of diamonds, seven of spades. So that's fine.
Yep. So we'll quickly verify. Attenborough's hand does just check call the turn. No reason to raise with king, no kicker, and the clubs to back it up. And on the three of spades, I mean, I didn't have any doubt about your river play. It seems just like a good jam to me once we arrive with jack high, no club. And that seems to be in an agreement with how the solver plays this spot. Now that the flush draw's missed, we don't want a club now, right? So arriving here with a 7 in our hands, low showdown value. I mean, is there any reason to give up these hands really?
Solver says no. Yeah, nice to see that the logical pattern that we were discussing watching the hand holds true when we're looking at the sim as well. On the turn, you prefer having a club. On the river, you prefer not having a club. Very clear and very common heuristic that we see in a lot of these spots. So yeah, that's cool to see.
Back to roughly even stacked now. Espen, you're at a slight disadvantage. 60 big blinds effective. Attenborough raises. Was he using the same kind of pre-flop strategy as you? Was he 2.5xing and limping, or did you not play enough hands to really figure it out?
I think he was, but honestly, my memory, my memory eludes me. It's very blurry this whole tournament, and even the heads up. Like,
Well,
I'm
we
trying
know
to
he
remember.
limps the button four-handed, or five-handed, was it? So I would think that he's got some limps in his heads-up game.
You would think so.
So
That's one big one on the flop.
one big blind on the flop, 8-3 of spades, just nothing. You float with the queen high. I think you seem maybe more surprised by his play than yours. I think yours is fairly standard.
I don't think he gives me much of a choice once he bets one big blind. I would not play one big blind though. I mean, I understand what he's thinking. Like, one big blind is fine if you're playing like low jack versus big blind or whatever, right? Because I have so many autofolds. But when you're playing heads up, ranges are so wide that I wouldn't think that one big blind is going to be the size here. But you can probably explain that. You can probably correct me if I'm wrong on that since you're the heads up expert.
Well, why don't we have a look at the solution? But I do have some thoughts. All right, so looks like you were right, Espen. The recommended sizing here is 40% pot. I mean, when I play heads up, I just kind of have a default system for bet sizing on paired boards, and I would default to 25% pot or so. Just in general, it's not going to be that far off from optimal. but yeah, it looks like one big blind is not preferred, or even 25% pot is not preferred to 40. That said, even against 40%, your hand, queen six offsuit, is just a clear continue. Maybe unfamiliar types of hand strength usage here, but all the way down to, 9 high backdoor flush draws with no straight draw interaction whatsoever. These are continues in heads up against 40% on the flop. So you can imagine how wide the range is going to be against one big blind. But you don't have to imagine how we would play against one big blind, because I can edit the sizes right here in GTO Wizard. So when we switch Adrian's bet size on the flop to one big blind, any backdoor flush draw continues the flop. Doesn't matter how weak your hand is. I mean, we're peeling the flop with 10-7 offsuit. How do you feel about the one big blind bet, maybe even as an exploit, Espen, given that this is the counter?
I see where you're going with that. I would probably not be able to defend enough versus this, but I would also not be able to defend enough versus the B40. Some of the designs there, like the 9-3 suited versus B40, I would not be defending, I think. So I think it's equally hard to defend versus B40 as versus this, I think. For me at least.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Any aggression is going to overperform here, so every bet is just going to be making more than the sim says. Looking ahead to the turn, I mean, in light of all that floating that you're meant to do against the one big blind on the flop, I thought betting with 8-3 of spades on the turn was just like a pretty sharp and pretty nice looking bluff. When we have spades, it allows you to have clubs, diamonds, hearts, right? And it does look like when we plug this size into the solver for turn, it's just a pure winning bluff with 8-3 of spades.
Yeah, I think that's a cool concept, not just for heads up, but in poker in general. Like often on rainbow boards, the no equity hands that you want to bluff on the turn are going to be the suited hands that don't interact with the three suits you have on board, because you want to block the flush, backdoor flush draw floats, right? And we can see that very clearly displayed here. The 8-3 of spades just wants to bluff more than any of the other suits. So yeah, cool concept.
Still even stacked here. You're opening the button with king queen offsuit. And with the big blind ante out there, 8-5 offsuit look good enough to defend.
I would think so, yeah. It's probably right on the border, though. It's probably the divider where 8-6 seems like very, very clear. 8-4, I'm probably just folding. 8-5, yeah, probably just take a flop, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, it does seem like a defend to me. 2.5x, it's the size up might discourage us from playing this wide, but I suspect it's in there.
Remember, you gave me some coaching before I went into the three-way before the start of this day. I think we had like a morning meeting in the WSOP cafeteria where you gave me just like some easy pointers in terms of like how wide I need to be, like what size I should use, how wide I need to defend when it's big blind ante, just like a few quick pointers, because I had mostly played online before this, so I wasn't used to playing heads up with big blind ante as much as I am now, because now I play mostly live, but before this I was just playing online. So yeah, it's kind of fun that we're doing a review on this now when we had that meeting before, like this morning that we played this. Me and you had a meeting discussing heads up strategy. It's kind of cool.
I remember that well. Just as we watch this hand now, I mean, you both check to the river with hands that look pretty showdownable and reasonable to me, and now Attenborough's betting over pot on the river. Did you give this one any thought to bluff catching, and do you think that this is appropriate for his hand?
Honestly, I can't remember. I don't remember this hand at all, but it does seem like kind of a reasonable bluff catcher to me. I don't think he should be bluffing queen high or king high. So I have just like two unblockers to his bluffs. And yeah, I think that's kind of reasonable, to be honest.
I
Yeah,
also
it's like,
wonder if there's any, sorry to interrupt, but like I also wonder if there's any inclination when we see this bet size on the river, like, is this what you would come up with when you're bluffing, or like does this track as a bluff to you?
question. Um, Probably not. I would probably just try to find. I would probably play two sizings, like one really big one with like 10x and 3x, and then like and straights and stuff, and then like kind of a smaller, more uh like half pot of B40 or whatever, where you can just put every pair, like every 6x, every 8x,
Yeah.
like pocket deuces, whatever, you know. Um, maybe, but I'm not sure. You're the heads up expert. Tell me.
Well, let's take a look at the river spot to talk about it for a second. So I took us down the check down line in this solution. I plugged in Adrian's chosen size of 6 big blinds on the river. First of all, you can see, Espen accurately assessed the fringe nature of this 8-5 offsuit pre-flop. It was very much the bottom call. This is why it's at a low frequency here. It was just mostly folding pre-flop. But post-flop, Adrian's line is correct to the river. But it looks like it's a little bit too thin on the river, and I don't think it's way off. You can see if I just, move right up to Jack 8 or Queen 8, you've got a pretty clear preference for overbetting in this line. But when you have no kicker, no interaction with the straight, it's a little bit ambitious, and maybe we just want to check or block bet. The other kind of interesting thing that we found from this is that even against the large size, Espen, your hand was a real decision. I mean, it looks like you
It was
played your hand well to get here pretty often, but it's kind of break even on the river. So what do you think? Just make a read on the end, or is there anything unique that you're seeing once we look through the sim a little?
Mm, no, I did notice actually that he did bluff some queen high on the river, which I assumed that he wouldn't. I think like queen 9, for example, was bluffing quite a bit.
Mm,
Um, yeah, so I was a bit surprised by that we bluff as strong as queen high. Um, I mean, it's a paired board and it's heads up and it's wide ranges. We check down. I would assume that queen high is just like kind of gonna be happy trying to show down. Um, so I was a bit surprised by that, but my hand still seems like a kind of a clean bluff catcher, just having two very high cards, it's yeah.
yeah, I tend to agree, and I maybe would have gotten curious here against some players, but you can also see how dangerous it is to make these ambitious bluff catches when someone like Adrian is perfectly capable of flipping, the dynamic and going too thin for the large size. So there is a reason why we want to control our calling frequency with hands like this. We don't want to accidentally get exploited by someone who's taking hands that are too thin to bet for value and just always betting them.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of the strategy that brought Addamo so much success and fame, right? He was impossible to play against, not just because he was bluffing every hand, but he was also going like super thin for value for like big sizings.
Yeah.
He was just like using like big polar sizings, and then he just had like third pair or whatever. So you couldn't really just like yeah, it's really interesting when people do this strategy. It's high variance, like is a volatile strategy, but it's really tough to play against.
Attenborough on the button this time, continuing to raise 2.5x. You've got Jack 9 suited in the big blinds. Maybe a 3-betting candidate.
Yeah, I would think it's strong enough. It's obviously like very, very tilting spot if you get 4-bet, but kind of a whatever one to me between 3-betting and calling. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It is against an aggressive opponent who's kind of likely to show up with random 4-bet jams or non all-in 4-bets even. I would lean towards calling as well. It's a little bit thin for value.
Yep. Very nice flop and turn.
Yeah,
Interesting what size to choose here, or even if you should bet at all. You have such a strong hand, but you have such a lock on the board as well. Like if you have all the cards, can you get value from? It's yeah, interesting one.
it's a good point, and also someone as aggressive as Attenborough's been playing through the spinal table, like maybe we can just count on him betting in position at some point with most of his, you know, calling hands essentially. Like a 5 or an 8 or even a good ace high might just decide to bet at some point.
Mm. So I went with B33 on the turn, B25, B33, I think.
Yeah. 8
Yeah,
million into 24.
Mm-hmm.
Idea of betting thin for value, I guess, makes sense. My preference is generally to go bigger. Just in general, in heads up, I find like 2/3 or larger turn probes are the most useful. And then, anything that would want to bet smaller can just go into checks and do totally fine to protect the checking range. But I mean, is there anything, as played, we go small enough that I suppose Adrian's just convinced that he's chopping sometimes or like has similar hand strengths, right? He kind of snapped it off. Do you have any regrets about the bet sizing, or you think that this is part of a totally fine strategy?
I mean, butterfly effect. Hard to have regrets, I guess. But I don't know. It seems like um I don't know. I know what I was thinking. I was thinking I'm gonna have a lot of 8x and 5x that I want to bet thin for value. So I need some really strong hands in there to protect as well. Um, but I'm not sure if this one should be in there. Mm, Yeah, maybe you would rather just put the boats in there where you're less likely to get called, like the Jack 8 and the Jack 5 and the Jack 6. Put some of those in the super tiny block maybe, where you
Yeah.
can block and then go all in if you get raised. And then my hand just wants to go bigger for value, I would think, looking
I
at it
do
now.
I do like this idea. That's a common one. If we know that we're splitting and you want to use small bets with, 6x or 8x or 5x like weak hands, take the strong hands that share cards, take the strong hands that crush the board, basically, and include those in that range. Um, but when you've got a jack and an empty side card, it's just so important that you bet big and get called by an 8. Um, he's probably meant to raise an 8 at some point, like, based on how small you went on turn and river, but I don't know if I would count on him doing that. I think I'd rather put the money in myself.
I would count on him raising, like, at least on the river, if he had, like, queen or king 8 or better. For sure, if he
Yeah.
has ace 8, he's gonna raise the river, right? But
Yeah.
where that cutoff is, hard to say.
On the button now, 55 big blinds deep. Looks like you're reaching for limping chips with the queen jack offsuit.
Seems fine. I
Attenborough
don't know. Just randomize. I
Attenborough
would
just
assume
checks
this
the
hand is
jack
gonna
9.
raise.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by jack 9 suited checking against the raise. So you had the same 2 cards against a raise, and when thinking about 3 betting, I find it too thin. But when thinking about raising versus a limp, I don't find it too thin. I think it's a good
Mm,
raise for value, and if you do get limp 3 bet, you just call.
agree. I go for the one big blind on the flop, which I think is actually completely fine here. I thought it was too small in the raised pot we played earlier, but here in a limped pot, I think it's probably just good. Could
Yeah,
be B40 here as well, but
I would agree. You can't go smaller than one big blind, but it is a third of
true.
the pot in this setup, so I think it's the right size. Adrian's raise is interesting. Um, Thin for value, but do you like just kind of attacking these boards with small raises in general? I mean, I know this is a thing in tournament play. It's definitely reasonable in heads up play, but just stylistically, like this seems like it fits his game, and he's willing to check now on the turn. Are you a fan?
I do like the Jack 9 in the sense that it unblocks a lot of my continues. It unblocks every Broadway. Like if I have like Queen 7 with the Queen of Diamonds, I'm gonna have to continue probably, right? Him unblocking a lot of my continues is good, I think. Um, and obviously has a really strong hand. Ranges are insanely wide. I bet one big blind again on the turn, which I don't I don't know about this one. I know what I'm
Yeah.
thinking, but I'm
Yeah, can
not
you tell
sure.
me what's the idea? Like what's the strategy that you're hoping to work out when you use this size?
I'm obviously thinking that if I have like pocket anything. If I have pocket threes on the turn, I can just bet one big blind to get him to fold a hand like 10-4 with the 10 of diamonds or something like this, you know, that I can just bet super tiny amount and fold out all of his flop bluffs, basically. But I'm not sure if that's like the route that I want to be taking. I don't, yeah.
Certainly seems to have
Like
caught his interest. Like one thing that's nice about the way you played this hand is that it works well with bluffs, right? Like bluffs now have incentive to take this line, because they get to force out some total air balls that he check raised on the flop. And then once we get to these river spots, it looks like you've just kind of got, you know, maybe the deep tank with Jack 4 suited tipped you off, but you've kind of got a curious customer on your hands, right? So any lines that you can take that are like bluff consistent, I feel like kind of work well in the metagame. And how different is this really from like checking behind the turn and then betting the river for a larger size, which is maybe more theoretically sound.
Yeah. No, I like that I found the river value bet at least. It's very obvious, but I could see some people being scared after a flop check raise to go
Definitely.
at bet, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That was a nice find. All right, you've got the chip lead back. We're still 60 big blinds deep. You're limping now with the queen deuce offsuit. Plan here, I assume, is to limp fold.
Yep.
Attenborough just checks with the jack 4. Seems pretty typical so far for playing deep stack. These two weak hands don't usually want to put any more money in the pot.
Yep. Pretty decent flop for me.
So facing one big blind, Attenborough's shown an aptitude for playing aggressive strategies. Looks like he's going for check raise again. Little bit of a size up on the low paired board compared to, I think he went 12 million or 3x on the high paired board earlier. Any thoughts against this raise? You know, are you reading into this at all? And what led you to the choice to 3-bet this flop instead of just flatting?
I think it's kind of consistent that he goes bigger on this smaller board. Like the 4 is going to need a lot more protection than if it's like a higher board, you know? So I think that makes sense. I realized that I have one of the, if I'm going to play a bet 3-bet range, I think I have one of the best hands for it. I have like one of the strongest deuces that I can have. I don't have a heart, which I like. I think I'm more likely to slow play if I have the queen of hearts. I think also he could be check raising sometimes ace high for value. If he has like ace 3 or ace 5, it could be maybe some hand that he puts into kind of like a mergy check raise sometimes. So I thought like the queen deuce is like a nice one to bet 3-bet if I'm gonna play a 3-bet range on the flop. I also felt like it was gonna be perceived as quite bluffy. I don't think he expected me to bet 3-bet a deuce. At least that's how I felt in game, but obviously hard to say what's going through his head in reality.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you know, for those who know the outcome, it certainly seems accurate. But at the moment, you know, as you're playing the hand, it seemed like on the flop, you know, you left the size small enough to maybe leave some doubt about what you were claiming. You know, maybe you could have your own kind of thin value by going click like 2.3x or whatever on the flop. But now you're going just very clearly setting up stacks, 62 into 76, 130 behind now into 200. Do you think against that kind of claim on the turn, Attenborough has a chance to even get away early from this one? Or do you think that, you know, if you're trying to play the hand from his side, do you actually believe that story that this is a lot of bluffs?
I'm probably just out on the turn with his hand, to be honest. Like, I get what he's thinking. Like, he's unblocking all the hearts. He's unblocking 3, 5, 6, 7, which I think is really good. I think I don't think I would, but I kind of like your idea of playing bet 3-bet on the flop with like pocket sevens, for example.
Mhm.
A hand that needs a lot of protection, doesn't block his like 6-3, 6-5, 5-3, all these hands. So I could see that. Obviously, when I go big on the turn, I don't have pocket sevens anymore. I don't have eights either. Uh, Probably would have to maybe slow play. I don't even know what I would do with eights, but it doesn't matter. I don't think I was playing bet 3-bet with anything but a deuce on the flop. Well, hopefully some bluffs as well. But I don't think I was bet 3-betting pocket sevens on the flop. Um, but yeah, his hand seems like him calling the turn, he's kind of just like praying that I'm not gonna follow through on the river, that I'm gonna just have like 2 hearts, that I'm first of all gonna miss the river and then check back, you know? That's kind of what he's praying for. Or he's just thinking like, I'm just gonna call him down on a, like a blank river, you know, which uh it's ambitious for sure. I would probably just let go of his hand on the turn already. Um, yeah.
Well, as a spectator for this heads up match, I mean, it really was like 50% Attenborough just agonizing in the tank and talking to you. Was there any approach that you had that was like, I'm not going to engage with this guy, or is this just your default? Mm, yeah, you know, you're all in. There's no more decisions. I'm catching a shot of you with your eyes closed behind those sunglasses.
No, that's my default in any scenario, unless I'm playing just like a fun tournament with friends or whatever. In any scenario now, if I'm all in, I don't really try to interact at all. I'm not like a speech play guy. I'm more like a think about the ranges in my head, yeah, in my own head kind of guy. Um, so yeah, I remember this spot. I was just doing some meditation technique and kind of just trying to disconnect from uh, everything, you know, like not try to be emotional, not try to think about like, oh my god, what if he calls? I've won the WSOP Main Event, you know, like just try to be not in the spot at all. Just be disconnect, go to another place, do some meditation, and then see what happens. I did have value again, of course, in this spot, but I think this would be like particularly important if I did just have like the 6-5 offsuit here. If I did have one of those bluffs that I just um, went somewhere else, because in that scenario, I think it's even harder to not give off anything, you know, to not show any signs of nervousness. If you're in this spot
Right.
and you actually have the bluff, I think even having those meditation techniques or whatever you want to use is even more important in those spots. Um,
100%. All right. So starting from your spot in position on the flop, looks like a lot of stabbing for one big blind. And I think this just kind of makes sense, right? You're effectively the in position aggressor here. Like you've got the good hands or more of the good hands than the big blind. So starting with a stab and certainly stabbing with most of your good hands. Uh, I just want to show the check raise strategy for Adrian first and get your thoughts. I mean, is this more polarized than you were expecting? And any thoughts on just the sizing approach and the overall range?
I mean, he used the right sizing, but he was obviously a bit more depolarized with his hand choice in game because he used the jack 4 off, which we can see is just calling.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I'm not surprised looking at this, but I'm also not surprised him taking the aggressive action with his hand because he was just taking the aggressive action with a lot of hands throughout the tournament. He was an aggressive player, which is a good way to play poker in general, but maybe especially in the WSOP main event. Um, yeah,
yeah, and just to kind of speak to why I think the flop raise is not great is like we're still playing quite deep. You were 60, 70 big blinds deep to start this hand, and there's only 3 big blinds in the pot. So stack to pot ratio is massive on the flop here. Um, so I think people get caught up sometimes in thinking like, oh, it's top pair heads up. I can be aggressive in general. I can raise this stuff. And it's like, no, you're super deep out of position. You mostly just want to raise hands that are going to improve to the nuts at some point. and maybe you want to get a little bit of protection, if it fits within that strategy. But my mentality on the flop would be more based around hands that can improve to the nuts rather than, hands that might be the best hand right now.
Yeah, it's tough as well. Like, there's not that many good turns for Jack 4 offsuit, you know? So
No.
once you get called on the flop after check raising, it's pretty tough. Like, you're out of position, and as you said, like, it's very deep, and the board is gonna change for sure.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at your in position calling strategy because obviously, like you've got a ton of floats. You can be floating here with 10-9 offsuit with one heart. You could be
Yep.
floating, the 8-6 of clubs or the 9-7 of clubs or whatnot. There's a ton of ways that obviously this is an overall range that Jack 4 is doing fine against. But there's a ton of ways that you're going to be able to steal this pot away in position as the board changes. So I totally agree. Um,
Yep.
we had to edit this size a little bit to get the flop 3-bet, although I don't think that's a reflection of it being a bad size. I think that's just the default sizing that Wizard uses for 3-betting flops is 75%. But once we edit it to 45%, um, there's some creative stuff happening in your range. Obviously, a deuce and specifically your hand queen deuce is a fine value 3-bet. But there's some other stuff going on. I see a variety of hands I wouldn't expect.
There's, like, some, very like, the king 4 suited, 9-4 offsuit, 4 deuce as well. Seems like kind of a natural, just slow play. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we raise this small, it's partly about how we expect our opponent to respond. So it's partly about, are we ever getting 4-bet essentially on the flop? And as it's designed right now, we don't really ever get 4-bet on the flop, and we do get peeled quite a lot. We're getting peeled by, some pretty speculative draws and a bunch of the pairs or trips that raise the flop. Maybe we see a different response if we edit this to be a click 4-bet as well as an option, but I don't think it's going to majorly change. We're just in position, and the incentives are not really there for the out of position player to keep piling money in with marginal hands. So we're just building out a range that's prepared for a lot of different scenarios on turns and rivers. Yeah, it gets a little bit broken once we reach the turn because the assumption is that a number of those marginal hands that are similar in strength to what Adrian called with are not really getting here. They're either not check raising the flop or they're folding to the flop 3-bet, which maybe he didn't think was an option. So once we get to the turn, the range is so heavily weighted towards trips. Look at this range. It's 40% trips on the turn. Uh, we just found that the solution wanted to start leading because it had trips so often in this line. And it would be a little bit silly of us, I think, to node lock it all the way to the point where, it's distributed in the right way. So in position strategies now, it's like, oh, well, you can't really value bet because your opponent has trips every time. But I think the interesting takeaway for me is that we had a hand facing 3-bet on the flop that, maybe felt compelled that it had to keep calling and it had to keep calling against further aggression. And it was just nowhere near that strong of a hand class for the spot, right? There's this big disconnect between how the solver views a hand of this strength and how Adrian did.
Yeah, for sure. We can see here that if you have the jack of hearts, if you have jack 4 off with the jack of hearts, you're a bit more incentivized because you have the backdoor flush draw. But especially a hand like when you have the jack of clubs, seems like a particularly bad one, right? Where you're potentially also blocking some of my bet 3-bets. Let's say that I have jack 3 of clubs, might be a 3-bet bluff here, something like this. Um, but yeah, I mean, I understand what's going through his head. He was playing a very aggressive strategy. Maybe he expected me to fight fire with fire and just yeah, try to beat him at his own game. But of course, the net that I am, I just had it like every time, just had it.
That's a
Yeah,
good strategy for
unlucky.
winning a big tournament.
All right, so that's the final hand of the review and actually the final hand of the tournament as well. So this means that we have concluded this series. I hope you all enjoyed it, and see you for the next one.